Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Path of Exile University. We are going to be doing People Run, or basically a racing class with Tytykiller. So this is going to be for people that are maybe have played the game a little bit, but feel like Act 1 to 10 is taking a little bit too long, and we have a advanced racing session never seen before coming after this. And for me, this is going to be cozy because it's going to be the same as your teacher rolling into TV, a great, beautiful TV, and clicking play. So take it away, Tytykiller, one of the best racers in the Path of Exile community.
Hi everyone, this is People Run 101. Today we're going to be talking about currency and leveling and gearing. I know Zizaran has some guides on stuff like this. However, this is specifically looking at the campaign. So before I get started, I want to make a quick note here. I don't want any of you to just call me Tytykiller ever again. Alright, I didn't spend the last 5,000 hours of my Path of Exile career bettering myself and getting tenure at this professional institution, and I certainly didn't do it so some Twitch chatter just call me Tyty. If you're gonna say my name, use the full name, Professor Tytykiller. Anyone who doesn't do this is gonna get permaban for life, no ban appeal. That includes YouTube viewers as well. And guess what? You're all my friends, so you can all call me Tyty.
Aww.
I wanted to say thank you to Zizaran, thank you to chat. I wouldn't be here without you guys. So really, thank you from the bottom of my heart. I'm going to give you guys a heads up really quick. It's going to be very example and text-based. There's probably less jokes here than there were last time. Today is going to be a little bit more rambling, a little less concise. It's going to be a lot of text on screen, I'm going to be honest. After I finished typing up all this stuff, I kind of had like some wrist pains for a while, so I had to take a break. And then I had to come back to it later. But anyways, this is going to be more in-depth in some topics than last class, specifically on the topic of currency, because there's so many different things you can do with it. So first of all, we're gonna briefly talk about gearing. We're gonna talk about knowing like what's good. There are like base types that are good, but there are also items that are good. What's better in those cases. We're gonna talk about currency for pretty much all of today, and then we're gonna talk about essences for a bit and talk about essence crafting in like a leveling sense and like what I do with essences and what I do with currency. I'm gonna apologize in advance if there's any overlap here between Zizaran's identifying what's good guide and Zizaran's currency guide that he's done before. I just want to give my perspective on racing. This is a pretty standard thing to talk about is prefixes and suffixes. You'll go to your UI options here. You'll go to advanced mod descriptions and turn it on. Every item can have a certain amount of stats. These stats are put into two different groups. They're either a prefix or they're a suffix. Gonna be honest, the only things you're looking for on weapons are damage. So like you're looking for some number of like damage to spells and spell damage. You're looking for, some number of physical damage to attacks and percent physical damage on your weapons. For suffix on weapons, you're looking for cast speed, attack speed, resistances. You can get things like multiplier, like global crit multiplier. For armor, prefix, all you're looking for is life. Suffix, all you're looking for is resist. There's obviously plenty of prefixes and suffixes. However, to prevent you guys from being bogged down by a million of these different roles that can happen, these are all I look for. I'm going to be honest. I don't really look for anything else. How they work is that if you have a magic item like this, it can only have one prefix and one suffix, so it can no longer have any more roles on it, unless I use a regal orb to make it a rare item, but go over that later. And a rare item can have at maximum 3 prefixes and 3 suffixes, and this will be very important very soon. I get asked a lot, like, should I worry about bases? Yes, but you would rather have a good item instead. So the really good bases that I'm talking about are things like Leather Belt, which gives you 20 to 40 maximum life, Two Stone Ring, which gives you 2 different types of resistances, and a higher item level with the same amount of sockets. So what I mean by this is, let's say you have a Tricorn or something like that, level 10 base, somewhere around there. You're using it because it's got a couple green sockets on it. Well, you get to Act 6 and you're still using the same white, unrolled, no stat Tricorn. You might as well just grab like a two green socket helmet from the vendor, or look for one on the ground because it's going to be an upgrade almost no matter what. I always prefer to have good items on a good base over a good item on a bad base. However, I will prioritize having a good item on a bad base over a bad item on a good base. So this is an example of a good base is a Leather Belt. Gives plus 31 to maximum life, which may not be the most, but if you're level 10 Witch and you don't even have 200 life, 31 is going to be a lot. So here's an example of a good base. So it's a leather belt, which is good, but it's just a bad item because you can see the rolls on it are awful. It has 2 suffixes, which means that you can craft resistances, but why would you ever do that? It has no life on it. Like I said, that's what you're looking for. There's no resistances on it, which is what you're looking for. And it's supposed to say no flask mods instead of mobs. I was just thinking of killing monsters or something. But yeah, it's overall just a really bad item, so I wouldn't want to use this, and I would sell it. Now there's an example of a good item on a bad base. So you can see that it's stun and block recovery, which is it's alright, but it's not a leather belt. But you can see that the rolls, so the life that it rolled is basically as good as a leather belt. However, it's also got 26% cold resistance on it, and you can also craft another suffix on it. So even though it's about the same as last time, it's got that extra 26% resist. It's got a little bit of extra life. So I would use this for a while. I would actually end up using this for a while. What I mean by crafting a resist is a resistance is, again, a suffix. You can do this with 1 transmute, 1 alchemy. I would never use 3 chaos orbs on this item, but I would use a transmute on this item to craft it at the crafting bench. This is an example of a good item on a good base, so it's a leather belt, check. It's got a lot of resistances here. It's got 39 resistances. You can craft a resisting, a missing resistance. So you can see that we can't craft cold resist because it's already got that. Can't craft lightning resist because it's already got that. We can craft fire resist, or we can craft like fire plus something else. So we can do fire and lightning if you were really missing lightning, or you can just go all in fire. I would really like to have this kind of a belt in a speedrun. A lot of people will watch my stream. I will mouse over an item for 0.2 seconds and say, "Oh my god, look at this item, it's amazing," and chat will say, "I didn't see it because you run at 60 frames per second, Tyty," which is true. But generally when I'm looking at items, I'm just looking for resists, I'm looking for life, I'm looking for good bases. It's a mixture of all of those things. In addition to this, let's say that you were fine on resistances, you didn't need fire res, you had 105 already. You could also craft life. It's going to give you 15 to 25 life, and I'll talk about that more later. Are there any questions on the gearing section? Alright. I'm going to talk about currency then. So when it comes to currency, everything in the campaign has value, and a lot of things have more value in the campaign than they do in maps. This is why you'll sometimes see me get very, very excited for a transmute and an alteration drop, more so than when I'm fully blasting with double beyond every map in Software Trade League and I drop like 2 exalts and I'm like, oh, that's cool. This is because you need to know, one of the really important things about currency is you need to know when you need it. So for example, if you know that you need to buy Swift Assembly and Frost Bomb after Tidal Island, you're going to need 2 Scrolls of Wisdom, so you need to have 2 of those ready to go. And how you're going to get them. Another example would be like, let's say you're playing a Toxic Ray Miner, you need to know how you're going to get your transmutes, so you're going to have to sell items like rare and magic items unidentified. First we have to go over the obvious ones, so that's Wisdoms and Portal Scrolls. It may seem pretty straightforward. A Scroll of Wisdom will identify an item, a portal can create a portal to town. However, these do a lot more than that. In Act 1, you're going to have level 1 gems, like Stormblast Mine, Fireball, Caustic Arrow, those kind of gems, and level 4 gems like Frost Bomb, Orb of Storms, Puncture, Blood and Sand. All these gems will cost 1 Scroll of Wisdom each. You can buy 1 portal for 4 wisdom, so you can talk to the vendor, click on buy, and you can buy a portal scroll. It'll cost 4 wisdoms. I typically do this in speedruns where I know I'm going to need a lot of portals. So like, let's say that I'm no longer identifying items, it's an Act 5 run, I'm going to Gatava, I have 0 portals on me. I should buy portals. If it's on ExoCon, maybe I forget, but there's a lot going on there. Anyways, you can also sell 1 portal for 1 wisdom. So you talk to the vendor, click on sell, put in 1 portal, you get out 1 wisdom. This can help you get those early wisdoms if you really need them. You'll notice that the vendor has an option to buy a transmute for 7 portals. I almost never do this one. I don't think it's really worth it, unless you, for whatever reason, were dying for a transmute. But generally speaking, portals are going to be useful in the campaign, and they're going to be useful in maps. I almost never feel like I have enough until I'm like days into mapping where I'll stop picking them up. So, I mean, you can stop picking them up in a certain amount of hours, but anyways, 3 Scrolls of Wisdoms are also important because you can buy a normal ring. So let's say you need an iron ring for resist ring for the Wandcraft that I talked about in my last class. Later on, you can buy like a sapphire ring for 3 wisdoms, and you can buy a topaz or iron or ruby ring. You can also buy other types of jewelry with 3 scrolls of wisdoms, and I'll talk about that more in the essence section. Next, we have to go over armor scraps and whetstones. So early on, I will pretty much always sell these. These are money, all right? These are the juice. This is how you get a lot of wisdoms really quickly, is you will find like a strongbox, an artisan strongbox. This will drop you a lot of armor scraps. It'll drop you a lot of whetstones. You'll sell these at the vendor. Each armor scrap will be worth 2 scrolls of wisdoms. Each whetstone will be worth 4 scrolls of wisdoms. Despite this, you know, you could have like 1,000,000 scrolls of wisdoms just because you ran lab and you got 10 whetstones in a row, which is pretty awesome. But these have a few uses. The general idea is that an armor scrap and a whetstone will improve the quality of armor or weapon respectively. And when you improve the quality of something, it will have a higher chance to increase the number of sockets and the number of links. So let's say you had a really good item and you had like 3 armor scraps. You could throw those 3 armor scraps on and hope to 4-link it or hope to 4-socket it. Generally in a run, I will always drop my 4 links. It's very, very rare that I actually craft my own, unless it's an amazing item, just because I generally feel like in every run, I will drop at least 1 amazing item. So this is like 1 item that I will take all the way up with me through maps, maybe early maps, maybe even mid maps if I get really unlucky in that regard. But in those cases, I want to save a lot of my money for those kind of items. So if I just find some mediocre item early on that I could 4-link, I'll still just sell the armor scraps and the whetstones. Additional uses for whetstones is you can sell a whetstone with a magic or rare rustic sash and a weapon, and you'll get back a physical damage weapon, so it'll give you % physical damage. This is really useful for melee. It's really useful for bow builds that need physical damage. It's going to help carry your game throughout the campaign. I would almost never recommend using a magic rustic sash unless you're really desperate. I would almost always recommend a rare because it's going to be a higher roll. Another thing you can do is you can sell an item with 20% quality on it. So like let's say you open a strongbox. The strongbox says items have 20% quality. You can pick those up and sell them for armor scraps if they're pieces of gear, or whetstones if they're pieces of weapons. There's also another craft. So like let's say you have a weapon with 17% quality that drops, a weapon with 13% quality that drops, and a weapon with 10% quality that drops. These add up to 40% quality, and you can sell them all. However, I find that this takes up way too much inventory space, so I will almost never do it. Going on, transmutes. Now, transmutes are actually very, very important. They may not seem like it. All they do is upgrade a normal item to a magic item. However, they have a ton of uses, as you can see on screen. These have the primary purpose when I'm in a caster run of getting a magic wand. I will usually look for magic wands at the vendor to see if I can find a magic wand with the colors I want. This usually makes my run go a lot smoother. Hopefully they don't cost a whetstone and instead they'll cost 2 scrolls of wisdoms, but that's perfectly fine. Transmutes can be used to buy the level 8 series of gems, the level 10 series of gems, and level 12 series of gems. This is things like Add a lightning, blast chain mine for level 8, void manipulation goes in there. Level 10 is usually your movement skills. It's going to be smoke mine, flame dash, withering step, that kind of a thing. Blink arrow goes in there. And then the level 12 gems are things like arc, sunder, and toxic rain. These are gained from entering Mervel's caverns for the first time. Another use for transmute is you can buy stat amulets. So let's say that you're playing a witch, you need a jade amulet. You can always buy a jade amulet for 1 transmute, provided that it isn't, the jade amulet itself isn't like magic, for example. Because if you go to the vendor and the item is a different rarity, it'll cost a different amount. But generally, these stat amulets will be a transmute. So if you need a extra dexterity from a jade amulet, some extra strength from an amber amulet, or some extra intelligence from a lapis amulet, you can always buy them for 1 transmute. Another use that's a little less common, but I still use, is you can sell a transmute for 4 scrolls of wisdom. So this is very important in endgame. This is a very nice way of getting a lot of scrolls very quickly, because typically around Blood Aqueducts, you'll have a lot of transmutes, and you'll be looking at using more alchemies at that point. Early on in the game, I like to craft resistances. This is going to give you 16 to 20% fire, cold, or lightning resistances. And these all cost just 1 transmute. Keep in mind that this is a suffix, so generally speaking, I will just use a resist craft if an item has an open suffix and it's good enough to use. Sometimes I'll just throw it on a ring that has like no stats on it, but I prefer to just throw an essence on it. But again, we'll cover that later. The resist craft is going to be requirement level 10, level 12, so don't do it at level 9 because you'll break your item. Don't do it at level 8, you'll break your item. Don't do it at 10 or 11. I did that back in the gauntlet race because I needed a lot of resistances, and I forgot that I bricked a piece of gear. You can also use it to craft flat to flat physical damage or elemental damage. This is more so important if you have like an amazing item early on, so you will get increased physical damage, so flat physical damage from Act 3, I believe it's in the sewers. You can burn the little butthole thing, however, not many people know that you can actually just like use a movement ability straight through it. Don't tell GGG, although I'm sure they're aware, they just haven't fixed it. Sometimes I'll just jump through it really quick, grab the physical craft, and go use it. If I have an amazing axe, like, let's say for example I have a Vol axe on a duelist, and Vol X requires, I believe, 23.
Double axe.
Let's say, yeah, you're right. And let's say it has like 70% increased physical damage and some attack speed, and it's a rare item, so it can have more modifiers. I'll go grab the craft, do my little racing exploit, and craft on flat physical damage. The flat elemental damage to attacks is actually really important for things like Ranger, if you're playing like an elemental build, or I guess if you're playing like a physical / elemental hybrid build. You can also use it to craft percent physical damage. I think that actually costs 4 alts, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, and you can use it to craft a flat amount of spell damage. I pretty much almost never do that though, unless I have like a godlike +1 to lightning gems and it's missing a prefix. Maybe I would do it then. The last case use for transmutes is to use on a Quicksilver. Luckily, we always get a Quicksilver from doing the Tidal Island quest, and that will always come as a normal item, so I will use it on that to turn it into a magic flask. And I'll talk about crafting flasks in a little bit. Alterations, the highest use I ever use for alterations is going to be doing two wand crafts. That's from using an alteration, a resist ring, and a magic wand. That's going to give you a very nice wand, pretty much to take you through the entire leveling process. This can also be used to buy the level 16, 18, and 24 gems. So this is all the gems from Act 2 and the first gems from Act 3. So this includes things like your Heralds, your Herald of Ash, your Herald of Ice, your Skitterbots. This also includes support gems for like elemental focus, faster attacks. And then Act 3, it's going to be your curses like conductivity, flammability, as well as gems like Pride and some other stuff, I don't remember. On top of that, I think purities are in there as well. On top of that, you can craft 15 to 25 life as a prefix, which I'll use every now and again. It's an okay craft, it's pretty cheap. You can also alteration a flask for better outcomes, and because of this, and because we need alterations later in a run, typically I won't sell these, although they do sell for 4 scrolls of wisdoms if you sell them at a vendor.
When doing the wand craft as well, also be careful of what Tai mentioned earlier with the level requirement. Like the if you use the rare ring for the craft, then it'll be level 20 required level, I think it is.
Correct.
So if
Magic
you do
is
that at level
14.
19 right before killing Val, it can screw up your run pretty hard.
Yes, it can. Alright, going on to augments. So I almost never use these when an item has an open suffix. Like let's say you have a magic item and it's a ring and it's got like 50 life on it. I typically don't use an augment on it unless I have a regal. This is what makes regals really important, but I'll talk about a regal and what it does later. I will almost always opt to craft resistances, and because of that, I will use it for augmenting a flask, or I'll use it for a movement speed recipe. So the movement speed recipe is you can sell a pair of boots, or well, just one pair of boots, with a Quicksilver flask and an augment, and this will give you 10% MS boots. I don't always get an extra Quicksilver. Usually I will use the 2 that I get in a run, one from Tidal Island, one from Den. If I already do Den and I drop an extra Quicksilver, I'll do this in runs where everything lines up and I have those. If I'm not going to go with 3 Quicksilvers like a maniac. If I am running through Act 1, I've got my Quicksilver from Tidal Island, and I drop another one, I won't do the Den quest, so I won't do the 10% MS craft. I get asked that question a lot. And another thing you can do is an additional movement speed craft. Like, let's say you have movement speed boots, and they've got like just 10% movement speed and nothing else on them. You can sell the movement speed boots with a Quicksilver Flask and an augment, and this will upgrade the movement speed the boots have by 5%. So like, if you have 10% boots, they'll turn it 15. If you have 15, they'll turn it to 20. You can do this with rare boots as well, so you can turn like an amazing pair of boots with 25 ms into a pair of boots with nothing but 30% ms. However, I will usually opt for somewhere between having good movement speed and having good stats. If there's like a difference between, like, let's say I'm in Act 6 and I find a pair of boots with 15% movement speed, but the pair of boots I'm using right now has like 70 life, it's got 30 fire res, 20 cold res, and 25 lightning res. I will usually use the one with resistances and the one with life because I'd rather stay alive in that kind of a case. Unless I was going for some world record, in which case I'd say forget those boots. The last ditch effort you can use with augments is going to be the movement speed craft. So if you don't get an extra Quicksilver Flask, which I tend to not do, because I'm never lucky, you know. In Act 2 Caverns, there's going to be a movement speed craft for 3 augments. It's right by the waypoint. It's going to give you 10 to 14% movement speed. Baubles. Baubles, these are really important. I was going to cover these later, but I want to go over crafting flasks. Baubles can be used to increase the quality of flasks. That's pretty much it. These are really important early, these are really important late. I'd say they're more important later on. However, I still think that they find their uses in speedrunning. Most notably because on Tidal Island, you always get a Quicksilver Flask that rolls normally. It's not magic or anything. So I will usually throw a bauble on that if I find one super early. If you use it on a magic flask, it'll give you less quality. And if you're asking what quality does for a flask, it increases the duration of it. So here you can see that the one on the left, it lasts for 4 seconds. The one on the right lasts for 20 seconds. Nice, by the way. And for HP potions, it will increase like how much life it restores. I believe mana potions increase how much mana it restores, that kind of a thing. So these are kind of nice to use. You might say that 0.2 seconds is not that much of a difference. However, over the course of 4 hours, that will make a bit of a difference. So I know that Zizaran's already covered how you can craft flasks, but I want to kind of just go over my TLDR, TLDW, whatever you want to say. Basically, if you have a normal flask, you're going to want to bauble if you have them. You're going to transmute it to turn the flask magic. You're going to alteration it to change the mods if you don't like it. If you have a good prefix or you have a good suffix, you're going to augment it to add a good mod. Good suffixes include things like movement speed, freeze immunity, bleed immunity. Good prefixes are good things like duration or charge recovery, those kind of a thing. So if I find any of those, I will chuck an augment on it. Here's an example. So I've got a Quicksilver Flask here. I decide to use baubles on it, and then I transmute it. You can see that this is a desirable prefix. It's duration. If I'm speedrunning, I'm not gonna look for a good prefix. I'm gonna be honest. I'm not really dying for a good prefix. I'm really dying for those adrenaline rolls that give me movement speed, the heat rolls that give me freeze immunity, the staunching rolls that give me bleed immunity. I'm really focusing on the suffixes more than the prefixes, but if you can get both, that's always a plus. So duration, this is an amazing prefix. I love finding duration. I augment it and I get increased evasion rating. You can keep this if you like. It's basically like a semi-stibnite, semi-jade kind of thing. If you're going with an evasion build, this is obviously really good, but if I'm speedrunning, I'm just going to go for movement speed, so I'm going to alteration it. Stun and block recovery actually has its uses. I find that this comes up a lot on the Quicksilver that you get from Tidal Island. I didn't think this was very good until Dead and Doom told me that it was pretty good, and I still kind of didn't believe him until I got stun locked like 8 times in a row in a race, like very early on in my career, and I died, and I was like, well, stun is a bunch of BS, but anyways, that's just my own personal ramble. You can keep this if you like and augment it so it gains a prefix. I'd be perfectly fine. However, because I've got 20 quality on this, I'm going to go ahead and alteration it again. I alteration again, I get freeze immunity. That's awesome. That's what I'm looking for. It's missing a prefix, so I'm going to augment it. And we got one of the worst prefixes, in my opinion, because ideally you're not getting hit, and ideally you're not getting critically strike when you get hit. So this isn't amazing. It's not the best thing in the world. However, you got the freeze immunity. You have so many different flasks to craft during your run that you're just going to take this. It's going to be pretty fine. You're, like I said, you're really just looking for the suffixes here. At this point, I would start to craft other things. Let's say I started crafting a silver flask. I got freeze immunity and duration on it. That's great. I can go back to this Quicksilver. I can start rolling the Quicksilver again. Important things to note is that you cannot get Adrenaline unless you use a level 5 Flask. Adrenaline is increased movement speed. This is probably the most desirable mod you can ever get in a speedrun, you can ever get while leveling. This comes from an item level 5 Flask. You can't get that from Tidal Island. However, you can get it from the Den, and you can get it from anything like Submerged and Beyond, I believe. So, if this is your Quicksilver Flask that you got from Tidal Island, which won't be because of level 9, but let's say this is the Quicksilver you got from Tidal Island, don't spam re-roll this to try and get Adrenaline. It won't happen.
And you can very, very easily roll freeze immunity on the first flask you get from Hail Rake, because it's so low item level that there's barely anything you can roll on it.
Correct. I'll be going over that in my XP guide, but as a cool little trick, the level of the flask is determined by your level when you grab the Quicksilver or when you kill Hail Rake. I'm not really sure, but generally speaking, you'll want to be level 4 when you kill Hail Rake, because that turns it into a level 4 Quicksilver Flask. That means that you can actually get a heat roll on it, but you can't really do that if it's a lower eye level, like eye level 2, for example. So next I want to talk about Regal Orbs. Regal Orbs are very rare, but they are pretty good. I really like finding Regal Orbs. I don't find them in every run. Even if I do like a number of runs in a day, I'm maybe only going to get 1 or 2. Just feels like they're less common in the campaign. I wish they were more common. GGG, if you're watching this, please buff these drops. They're amazing. Just by a smidgen, but I guess if there's thousands of currency bots, then a 1% increase is gonna change the market. So maybe they got the right idea. Anyways, Regal Orbs they kind of start off a little bit more expensive. So they'll start around like a Chaos Orb or so, and they'll drop in price like very quickly. So the best use for them is going to be selling them early if you don't have any use for them. You can save them for later, which I sometimes do for like jewel crafting on my own. If I want to get like a nice Viridian jewel, nice Cobalt jewel, that kind of a jewel. However, the primary use I have for these is when I have an amazing magic item and I want to use a Regal Orb on it to turn it into a rare. So I don't always have an amazing like magic item. However, generally speaking, I will continue to pick up jewelry throughout a run. So all the way up through like Act 9, Act 10 or so, I will pick up a magic 2-stone ring. I'll pick up a magic sapphire ring. I won't really pick up like a magic diamond ring because that will give me a crit chance. It's not as desirable of a base. So I will continue to ID magic jewelry. And for example, you can see the ring on the left we saw earlier. Has one suffix.
We're lagging a little bit. I think
Or
your connection might be dying.
Hello? Called internet? Hello?
Did you steal Lily's internet?
Hello? Can you hear me alright?
We have pixels. It's very pixelated.
Oh no.
And you sound like a robot. Oh, it might be clearing up.
Hello?
Okay, it's good.
Sorry, I was just transforming for a second there. Anyways, now that I'm back to my normal self, hopefully. Can you hear this alright?
Yeah.
Alright, cool. Alright, so this item on the left, it's a magic item. It can have at most 1 prefix and 1 suffix. It's got life, that's great. It's got fire resist, that's awesome. It can't have anything else. So a Regal Orb will turn it into a rare item, and no matter what, it will always have an open suffix. Like even if it lands a suffix, which in this case it does, it gives us 9 strength. That's whatever. It's pretty bad, I'm going to be honest. It's better than something else, I guess. But in this case, we can always craft cold resistance or lightning resist again. So this is a really good use of Regal Orbs in runs. It's going to be using it on magic items that you really like, and that will be a little better. Next, I'm going to talk about Chance Orbs. So Chance Orbs have 2 uses, all right? Chance Orbs have 2 uses, well 3 I guess if you really want to. This can be used to buy level 28 gems. This has a little bit of RNG in regards to like, I really need to get cremation running in a speedrun, and if I don't, it's pretty much bricked, and it's gone, it's dead. So I really hope to find at least 1 Chance Orb by level 28. If you don't have a Chance Orb, you can always buy one for 1 fusing. I'll talk about that again in a second. The level 28 gems are going to be typically some very impactful ones, depending on what kind of a build you play. Those are going to be things like Ray Spectre, Cremation, I think Earthquake's in there as well. But these gems are typically very, very impactful, depending on what kind of a run you do, I suppose. But in the past, this was extremely important, and in the current meta of speedrunning, it's still very important. If your build doesn't use any 28 gems, that's cool. You can just use it on Flasks instead. I don't like to do that because you're basically just turning a normal flask into a magic flask guaranteed using a Chancellor. They can never be rare items, right? You could technically roll a unique flask because it upgrades a normal item. So let's say a normal flask to a random rarity. It could technically be a unique flask. Pretty uncommon to happen. So they'll generally speaking turn into just a magic flask. And I don't like to do this because you need it for maps, and maps are very, very important. So I just save them till endgame. That's the best use for them. I'm gonna be honest. That's the best use. Is you need them for an early Kirak if you don't get any tier 1s that you need, and you're gonna need it for some early Zana maps as well. And this is gonna help flesh out your Atlas and fix a lot of the holes later on, because when you progress through Atlas, you're just gonna kind of like go through it really quickly. You're gonna find that your ship has a lot of holes in it, so you're gonna plug in all those holes with chance orbs. Oh, there goes my chapstick, and a bunch of like early maps because of the chance orbs. Next on, we're gonna talk about Orb of Fusings. You're gonna probably ask why I'm doing this first instead of Jeweler's Orbs. It's basically just to cover the fact that you can buy Chancellor for 1 Orb of Fusing. There are 2 options you can have with Orb of Fusings. You can save these for later. You can use them. I guess the third option would be to sell them, but even if I'm playing in a trade league, I'll pretty much always use my early fusings. I don't like to sell them. Fusings start off very, very cheap, and they become very, very expensive as time goes on. So I don't like to sell mine. In fact, I like to buy fusings early on in a trade league, especially softcore. Generally speaking, like I said earlier, higher quality of items means you're going to have better links. So if you have a 20% quality chest piece, it's going to have a higher chance to get a 4 link than a chest piece with 0% quality on it. I'm going to do some examples here. So this is an Orb of Fusing example. Let's say you're playing a Ranger, you need 3 green sockets. It's okay if it's just a 2 green. However, you have a chance at a 4 link. I generally don't like to 4 link my items unless they're high quality or they're amazing. I don't think I would 4 link this unless I had 4 whetstones turning to 20% quality. Maybe I get a 4 link from it. But yeah, you can use a fusing on it, and no matter what, the outcome will either be the same. So it's okay, like I said, to be just a 2 green. You could potentially get a 3 green. There's a very high chance of that. And there's also the small chance of a 4 link. I'm going to cover the Steel Mage strat, where instead of using a fusing, you actually just drop it corrupted. It's a corrupted 6 link. It rolled with 6 tier 1 mods, and it's +1 arrow. But, maybe you're not Steel Mage, so maybe it just turns into a 4 link. Anyways, we're going to cover Jeweler's Orbs next. So there's a similar concept for Jeweler's Orbs as the fusing. So basically, let's say you have like a really good item here. Like this is a 52 life. It has a little bit of fire resist, 10%. Doesn't really matter if it's fire, cold, or lightning. It's just got a little bit of resist, and it's got that 2 suffixes. So that means you can craft resistances on it. I would use an Alchemy on this because it's a really good item, and I would also use a Jeweler's Orb. Now, because I'm not Steel Mage, it's gonna turn into a 2 socket item, which in a lot of cases is perfectly fine. Even if you don't increase the amount of sockets by an insane amount, a 1 socket item will always turn into a item with more sockets. So that could be 2, 3, or 4. Generally speaking, this will be nice because it will reduce some of your socket pressure. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. The kind of colors you get depends on the kind of stats and the stat weights of those. And I will cover that when I cover chromatics. So we have to talk about chromatics first. Basically, a chromatic will reforge the color of sockets on an item. Let's say that you have 3 blue sockets on an item. How do you get 2 blue sockets and 1 green socket? Use a chromatic orb. Generally speaking, the general rule of thumb is that strength item will turn into more red sockets, an intelligent item will have more blue sockets on it, and a dexterity item will roll more green sockets on it. I should have deleted it. Anyways, let's talk about hybrid items in a second. Hybrid items. So these items can roll a mixture of colors. You can see that our good friend from earlier, the mask, has dexterity. It has 33 dexterity requirement and 33 intelligence requirement. You can see it right there, right next to level requirement. This means that it's more inclined to roll dexterity and intelligence. You can see that it's 4-socketed. We can look at some percentages here. Let me see if I have a link to this that I can link for you guys in chat. There you go. I use this to see percentages of really niche items. So like let's say that I want like 5 off colors on an item. I will use this calculator to determine how likely it is for an outcome to happen and how to get there. I don't use this for everything. In fact, I just use like the general rule of thumb, like an intelligence item is going to have more blue sockets on it. So I'm not going to try to get 4 red sockets on it. The tool that I'm going to use here shouldn't be used for everything. Like I said, you're going to spend way too much time in town if you do this. It's just going to be used here to help us understand a little bit about colors. So basically what the tool does is you can put in the number of sockets you have, the requirements of the item. So again, our good friend here has 33 dexterity, 33 intelligence. Let's say that I just want 2 blue sockets for it to have space for a couple of auras. Basically, it's going to be almost guaranteed if we use like just a couple of them. 2, 3, 4, 5, we should have two blue sockets, almost no matter what. If we want 3 blue sockets, well, it's going to be a little bit more, but it's still not that hard to get. So if I want 3 blue sockets, I don't mind throwing some chromatics on it. I think if it was to be 3 blue and 1 green, to be 6 chromatics. So again, it's very common. It's a hybrid chess piece. It requires dexterity. It requires intelligence. It's very likely to roll some green and blue sockets in there. Now, to show you guys why I will never use chromatics on a hybrid item to try and get a pure roll, so like let's say that it's, in this case, a green and a blue, or like a high dex, high int requirement item, like this one, high. The reason why I will never roll for 4 blue is because it's going to take you way more. As you can see, it's going to take about 24 chromatics to get 4 blue on this item. So if I want 4 blue sockets, like linked together for my space for my 4 link or something, I'm going to use it on a pure intelligence base. I'm not going to spam chromatics on this kind of an item. This is a very important concept, and hopefully I am explaining this okay. I think it makes sense. It makes sense to me.
Yep.
All right, cool. But yeah, this is going to be really important for trying to get the colors that you want for a new run, basically, whether that be on League Start or that be a speed run. To talk about why this is important is because, like I said, it helps us understand how to get colors better. Chromatic orbs will generally be saved in bulk, so like I will get a chromatic orb early. I'm not just going to use it willy-nilly on any item I want. I'm going to try to solve it by getting better items first. However, later on in the run, like I said, you will find that one amazing item. You'll want to use chromatics on that. Generally speaking, if you have better colors, this will give you more spaces for other gems. So like let's say that in this helmet you fit in all of your gems and like smoke mine in there. Well, you know, it's kind of a double-edged sword because now I have to use this chest piece, or now I have to use this helmet for a really long time. I can't replace my auras elsewhere because I don't have space for auras elsewhere. However, it's a double-edged sword in this way because all of my auras and my smoke mine is in my helmet. Now I can replace my gloves and my boots with anything, provided that, you know, my 4 link is somewhere else, like in my chest piece. So now I can replace pretty much everything else, so long as I have that 4 link, and that's really going to help out with prioritizing items with good stats over items with good sockets. You want kind of a mixture of both when you're leveling. I will always prefer to have the sockets I need for my absolutely mandatory gems. That's going to be things like I have a 4 link that I need. It's got these colors on it. That's my main gem. I need these colors for auras. And then from then on, it's kind of like, oh, well, I could get like, you know, Devouring Totem or some weird stuff. But Holy Flame Totem goes in there, for example, for a speedrun. That gives you Consecrated Ground. Don't need that, so that could be dropped. However, other things like Skitterbots can't be dropped, so you're always going to need to have space for your auras. Next, I'm talking about Blessed Orbs. They're meh. I usually save them for maps. I just kind of like forget them. It's kind of hard to like use them in the middle of a speedrun because they're a little bit of RNG. What they do is they randomize the numeric values on the implicit modifiers. So I talked about prefixes and suffixes, but I didn't talk about implicit. Implicit's just what the item rolls. So you can see here a Topaz Ring. Topaz Ring will always have lightning resist on it. A Ruby Ring will always have fire resist. And a Blessed Orb will just be able to change that, basically. That's all it does. Because of the RNG nature of it, you won't always get like a 20% lightning resist ring. So like no matter what kind of a Blessed Orb I use on this ring, it will always be better. Even if it rolls with 21%. A far more likely case is, let's say you have a really good ring, it's really good lightning res, or it's really good like life and resist on it. and it's like 26% lightning res, I'm not going to use a blessed orb on that because it could go down. Here's an example of it. I've got a pretty decent ring here. It's got 23 life. It's got some all resist. That's pretty much it. I mean, it's got some other stats on it, obviously, as well. That's all I'm looking for. It's got 12 to cold and lightning resist. No matter what kind of a blessed orb I use on it, it will always be better. So I use a blessed orb. So that changes from 12 to 15, which, 6% resistances doesn't sound like much, but that can really help take off some of the pressure you have to cap out your resistances.
It can actually roll the same number again.
Yes, correct. It can also roll with 12 again. My bad. Talking about alchemy orbs. Now these are really OP. These are pretty much the gold standard for runs. These are very important. They can turn an item rare. However, they're mostly used for crafts, and I have an entire page on crafts here. They can be used for the higher resist crafts. So if you don't want to use a transmute item because you've got a really good item that you're going to use for a while, either all the way up through blood aqueducts or even all the way up through maps, I will use an alchemy orb on it to craft on 21 to 28 fire, cold, or lightning resist. This can be found in Act 4 in the Crystal Veins. You can use it to craft 41 to 55 life in the Desecrated Chambers in Act 10. And you can also use it to craft on fire, cold, and lightning damage to spells in Act 7. I'm going to be talking about this a little bit more later on. However, the alchemy orbs are just going to be really important. It may not seem like there's too many crafts. Like I kind of hyped up the crafts a lot, as you could tell how excited I got when I turned the page. However, these three crafts right here are going to be super important. These three crafts are literally your bread and butter of pretty much every single run. The cold and the resistance crafts and the life crafts are very important. The life crafts, kind of less so. It's really just this resist craft right here that is amazing. It is the most important thing to note. You can obviously save them for maps later on if you'd like as well. Chaos Orbs. So if I'm in a trade league, I'm going to save these for trading. I'm not going to use these to try and YOLO some boots. They have some uses in speedrunning. So let's say you have like an item that's a 4-link. The 4-link is really bad, like really bad. Just use a Chaos Orb on it. But if you're in a middle of a league start, I would just usually save the Chaos Orb to get a few Chaos Orbs and then just buy a better item. It's also used for some crafts. There's a craft for even more resistances than the Alchemy one. It's from Dodri's Cesspool after you kill Dodri in Act 8, I believe. You kill her and it's 3 Chaos Orbs, but it's kind of expensive and I generally don't use it on pretty poop items, so it doesn't have that much of a use in speedrunning as much as other things. In the Chamber of Innocence in Act 5, you can craft 15 to 19% increased movement speed, which is pretty good. I would use this sometimes, but like I said, mostly in a speedrunning context, I wouldn't use it on League Start. One that I might use on a League Start, though, is the one that you get from the Epilogue, which is 20 to 24% movement speed. This is basically as close to 25% movement speed boots as you can get. Let's say that you have amazing boots, like the ones I said earlier, where like you had 60 life and like a bunch of fire, cold, and lightning resist. It has an open prefix. Cool, craft on movement speed. In addition to this, you can craft increased physical damage and % spell damage. I'll be going over this later about essences. These come from Act 9. The spell damage craft comes from the Boiling Lake, and the physical damage one, the % physical damage one, comes from the Quarry. Talking about Orb of Scourings here, these are almost exclusively used to remove crafts. An Orb of Scouring will take a rare item and turn it into a normal item. You can use it to take a magic item, turn it into a normal item. However, I usually use them on crafts. You can scour an item with bad rolls as well. Like I said, generally, if I have like really bad stats on an item, like really bad, I will scour it and I will either use an essence or an alchemy. I'll talk about essences again later. But we can take a look here. Like, let's say that you had 130% lightning resist, but you had like 50% cold. You could instead craft on 21 to 28% cold resistance. It'll cost you an alchemy, like I said earlier, but it'll also cost you a scour to redo the craft. In this case, this item is really good, so I don't want to scour the item. I just want to use it on the craft. Going on Evolve Orbs, these are usually saved, sold. You can use it for late map sustain. These start off pretty cheap in a league, so I generally just kind of hold on to them till late maps. You can also YOLO them on items if you want. A very common thing that people do is someone will drop a tabula, they'll link it to their friends will say ball or no balls. Fun fact, in the Exelcon race, when I died and I was sitting in town, I was actually looking at my inventory for a Vol Orb, and I was pretty sad that they were hidden in my filter. It would have been a pretty good clip. But anyways, you can YOLO them. Generally speaking, if I'm on a league start, like let's say that I'm playing Trade League, I don't want to vol them because although there is a potential league start where I drop a tabula, I vol it, turns into +1, everything's amazing, everybody's hype. There's also another league start where I vol the tabula and it turns into nothingness and poof, it disappears. So I, generally speaking, do not vol out items because I'd rather take the safer route. If I, for some reason, drop 2 tabulas in a run, or I had enough humilities for some ungodly reason, sure, use a vol orb. But even in that case, you'd be better off just having the extra like 10 to 16 chaos orbs on a league start. I'm just a streamer, man. I don't like dictate what you find to be enjoyable in the game. This is really up to you. If you want to use them, I would use them on chess pieces or gloves if you really want to use them. If that's what's fun for you and you drop a tabula and your friend says vol or no balls and you want to prove that you have balls, then sure, go ahead and vol it.
Nice.
But yeah, I'm not one for Gamba. But go ahead and do whatever you like. Do whatever you want for fun. Now these are orb regrets. I've got a few of these, but their primary uses are you can buy an alchemy orb. That's really just the biggest use I have for them. You can also sell them to other players. I should clarify that I didn't clarify earlier that when I mean that you will sell the item, I don't actually mean that you'll sell it to the vendor. I mean that you'll sell it to other players. I usually don't use orb regrets till like way later on. This is because for every single act will give you 2 respec points. Now you're not going to go do the fetid pools in Act 1 and full clear the whole zone. You're not going to go do the golden hand quest in Act 2. I think that's what it is. But unless you really wanted to be type it in global chat, then I guess maybe it's worth it to you. But there are a bunch of gems, or there are a bunch of respec points in the game that you'll actually do because they give you other things. So in Act 3, that's going to be like collecting the bus. Act 4, you're going to save Destret Spirits and Crystal Veins. Act 5, you're going to go grab Kutava's Torments from Reliquary. Act 6, you're going to do the gem quest thingy for Lily in the Twilight Strand. Act 7, you're going to do Kishara's Star. That's literally just on your way. Act 8, you'll do Tolman for the passive point. Act 10, outside the Reliquary. Now in Act 9, there's like a beast dude in the foothills. Sometimes I kill him if he's on the way. Sometimes my single target sucks, and I suck, and so I just don't do it. But this will give you at least 14 respec points from the campaign, and that's plenty to respec like an early build. So, for example, if I'm playing a Bladefall Blade Blast build, poison damage it's kind of meh early on. I'd rather have like Mistwalker for cast speed and to dodge all critical strikes. I'd rather have Opportunistic for increased damage, increased movement speed if I killed mobs. But I don't want to level as poison, so instead I will just go elemental early on, let the wand crafts carry me, and I'll just respec those points because I get plenty of them throughout the campaign. You can plan a little bit of respecking in your leveling if you'd like. You can respec up to like I said, 16 points generally. But I find that no matter what build I make, if it gets to endgame, there's almost always a better way to do things, and so I'm almost always like, hey, I need to respec half my tree because Zizaran's got a better tree on his guide, and I messed up and I wasn't following it correctly, and I just kind of took whatever, and now my build kind of sucks. So I need to use a bunch of regrets. That's usually when I either buy them or I just have a stockpile of them. But like I said, the primary use is remember how good alchemies are, where you can buy an alchemy for 1 regret at the vendor. Brandis coins, now this is a bit of a weird one. This will usually drop from like league mechanics and stuff, obviously Brandis, but if you're in a new league and you do the new league mechanic and it drops Brandis coins, get really excited, because I get really excited. These can be sold for wisdom shards, and because Brandis coins drop in such high quantities, you can sell them for a very high amount of scrolls as well. So let's say you did a Delirium back in Delirium League, it had Brandis on it, let's go. It drops 30 Brandis coins. That's cool because it gives you 6 scrolls of wisdoms. In Act 1, 6 scrolls of wisdoms is pretty big. That's pretty neat. So Brandis coins are actually pretty good. It's kind of just dependent on if they drop from the league mechanic or not, and if the league mechanic's actually worth doing. I'm not going to do a heist in the middle of Act 1, but maybe I'd do a Delirium if it was back in the game in Act 1. Of course, you could always save these for later. You could sell them to other players. Maybe you get a Headhunter from Parandus. Maybe you're juicing Parandus later on. I don't know. But if you drop them early on, chances are you're not going to get a million of these coins, but you'll get enough to sell them to be worth a lot. Ventura actually taught me this one, so shout out to the Ventura on that one.
The Ventura?
Yes, like OMG, it's the Ventura.
I'm a fan.
I'm a big fan as well. Next, I'm going to talk about silver coins. Just save these till you collect 10 Katava. I'm going to be honest. You can use them all then. There's some other uses you can use for them. So there's like a Tabular Prophecy early on. That one's in Act 3, I believe. There's like a 5-link Prophecy. I think you can get like level 50 or something. But generally speaking, you just want to save these for acting Katava. Unless you're doing it for a very niche reason. Maybe you can make some money early on. However, generally speaking, you're just going to be better off using it later because it'll probably have a better outcome. There's also a tier 1 map prophecy, so this requires you to go to the Chambers of Sin level 2. This can be done in Act 2 or in Act 7, by the way, so if you skip the waypoint in Act 2 and you get the tier 1 map prophecy, it's like the Lost Maps or something like that. You can actually go grab that really quick. I really like this prophecy early on. I typically forget it because I'm just lazy, but you can sell 3 of any sort of map to get 1 of a higher tier map. So let's say that I grab a bunch of silver coins and I roll a few prophecies and I get the lost maps. I'll go to X7 Chamber of Sins and I can just sell 3 of the same maps. So like let's say that I get 3 volcanoes, I can sell 3 volcanoes for 1 of a higher map in that region. I believe it's Glenrish Cairns right now, but that obviously changes depending on the league. Divine Orbs. So Divine Orbs, just save it for maps and like way further beyond, like, you know, divining a perfect unique item, for example. In racing, the only time I'd ever really use a Divine Orb would be for movement speed. So if I had an Adrenaline Flask, like this flask right here has 21% increased movement speed. It can go anywhere from 20 to 30% movement speed, so I'd use a Divine Orb on this. Even if it decreases the duration, it's fine. I would still use a Divine Orb here on a flask. The reason why I don't really use it on items is because let's say that you have a ring and it has like a middle of the roll fire resist. Well, it could roll anywhere above or below, and if you needed that much more resist, I'd rather just get it from somewhere else. Talking next about GCPs and chisels. So gem cutter prisms improve the quality of a gem. I'm never going to take off a gem in the middle of a speedrun to put on 1% increased quality so that it increases by 0.5% of something. Cartographer's chisels, it improves the quality of a map. You're not running maps in campaign, so obviously save them for maps. I like to chisel up really valuable maps, so if I'm trying really hard to get a next tier map, I will use them. Even if it's like a tier 4 map or something, I'll still use chisels if it's like that important for me to get the next one in line. But generally speaking, I'll save them for like high yellows, reds, those kind of things. Are there any questions in chat before I go on to essences?
Good job so far. It's really good.
Okay. I'm just gonna take,
actually, I've seen
few
some people
questions.
ask you about Chaos Recipe if you ever do it, especially during races.
I will do Chaos Recipe on League Start in Softcore because I think it's pretty valuable when it's day 1, Exalted Orbs drop. So what happens a lot on day 1 is everybody's running through the campaign. Billy drops an Exalted Orb. He's all excited. He goes to sell his Exalted Orb, and it's worth 12 Chaos Orbs because nobody wants a Chaos Orb, or nobody wants an Exalt when they're in Act 3, you know?
Damn it, Billy.
Damn it, Billy. So it's really sad. He holds on to it, and a few hours later it's worth 24, and then a few hours later it's worth 48. I will do Chaos Recipe very early on in day 1 till it's about like 50 to 60 Chaos. Some people will go further than that. I don't like doing it, so I will just do it if I have to. I used to never do it because I'm lazy. I don't like doing it. You can choose to not do it if you think that's less fun. You can obviously rely more on drops. What I found that happened over doing Softcore Trade League over and over again is that I would have some leagues where I would make way more currency not doing the Chaos Recipe because I dropped like 5 really amazing items because I'm not doing Chaos Recipe, right? So I'm running more maps, I'm getting more XP, my character is, going to get stronger because of that, and I'm going to kill more monsters. Killing more monsters equals more items equals more chances at better items. But what I found is that every now and again I would have a league start where I just don't drop anything, man. Like I run like a few hundred maps and I just don't get anything, dude. And I'm sure like everybody in chat's like, yeah, that's me. But there would be a league start every now and again where it'd just be like pretty bad and I'd be pretty poor. And I look over at my friend and I'm like, yo, he literally dropped the doctor in like his burial chambers. Like he was just running there for completion. But yeah, day 1 early on, I will do Chaos Recipe if my main goal is consistency. What is the best way to get wisdom scrolls in Act 1? Is it to sell normal items to vendor or magic and sell transmute? So I get that question a lot as well. So you don't want to like pick up a bunch of normal items, go back to town, sell them for two wisdom scrolls, then go back out. You almost always want to vendor items when it's convenient. When you're going to town for gems, you're going to town because you killed the boss, you got to go back to town. The game forces you to go back to town in a way. I will almost never pick up normal items after Tidal Island. I'm gonna be honest, unless okay, that's a lie. I'm lying. I will pick up normal items if they're a good base or if they are something I'm gonna use. But I will never pick up normal items to sell. There we go. I'm not gonna pick up like a two-handed axe to sell for one scroll fragment. Ever. Even if I'm in like mudflats, I'm not gonna do that because we don't vendor very often. The idea of speedrunning is that we run through very quickly and we vendor when it's efficient to do so. Therefore, I want more space for the magic and rare items, even if my inventory isn't completely full.
Lord of Rice wondering if stash tab affinities changed anything for you.
Nope, pretty much not. Even though you have stash tab affinities, you don't want to go back to town very often. So, yeah. Generally speaking, in a speedrun, you don't actually use stash tab affinities, even for the currency one, just because like I like to have everything just on one normal tab. I'll use like I can go through the whole campaign on just like one normal default tab, so that's usually the very first tab that I have lined up in a new league. And then after that, I'll use the currency tab and use an affinity on that, obviously. All right, essences. Now this one, there's not many slides, but this is kind of hefty. An essence will act as an alchemy orb, and it will give you a guaranteed roll. We can see here that this is a wailing essence of anger. It upgrades a normal item to a rare item with one of the guaranteed properties. So if you're using a weapon, it'll give you fire damage. If you're using an armor piece, it'll give you fire resist. And if you're using jewelry, it'll give you fire damage. There are three main categories of essences that I use throughout a run. These are going to be resist essences, spell damage essences, or physical damage essences, depending on what kind of a run you're doing. Now, resist essences are actually really interesting because you can craft on fire resist, cold resist, and lightning resist. And you can also use greed for life resistances. These are like some of the best things you can get. If I'm doing a run, I will almost always stop for these unless it's like a world record run or I don't need them. But even if it's like 10 to 14% resist, somewhere in there, I will grab these just because like that's an alchemy orb on it, but it gives me a little bit of fire resist guaranteed. So these essences are really, really important. These are the most important things you can find out of essences. Spell damage essences. These are also very interesting. A woe will give you spell damage, like percent spell damage. An anger, suffering, and torment will give you fire damage, cold damage, and lightning damage to spells respectively. The flat ones kind of start pretty bad. I don't use them very often. If I do use them in a spellcaster run, it's to use on a ring to get a wand craft. And I'm actually going to show you some examples in the game here. If I can switch over really quick. Let's see.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. You see that all right?
Yep.
All right, so I'm going to show you some examples of how to craft. These are ways that I would craft in the game. So you can see here I have a woe essence, I have a torment essence, an anguish, and a suffering. Well, this will just turn a normal item into a rare item. Let me go ahead and grab some scours really quick. Just grab some of those. Okay. So basically, what I would do is I would use a woe essence on an item. Cool, we got spell damage and some mana and pretty much something else. I mean, it's got cast speed on it. This is a nice wand because it only has 2 prefix modifiers. This is very important because in Act 7, like I said, in Act 7, you get flat damage. This is how I get amazing wands on my runs, is I will look for like I don't know, let's say I'm doing a lightning run. So I'll do lightning damage to spells, 2 alchemy orbs, boom. That's an amazing wand right there. That is way better than the wand craft. It's got 76% increased spell damage, and it's got a very nice lightning damage to spells craft roll on it. We can go over a few more examples here. Let me just move this over to the side. We can go over a few more examples. So let's say you don't get a woe essence. Let's say instead you get like a nice torment or something like that. Well, I can use the torment on the item. I can look at it and see that we only have 2 prefixes. Again, spell damage and flat damage to spells is a prefix. So I'm going to look for only having 1 or 2 prefixes. So I've got a tier 4 roll here. which is what that essence gives me, I can put on spell damage now for 4 Chaos Orbs. And I would actually kind of do this on League Start. Very expensive. Maybe if I was in Trade League, I wouldn't do this. I would use 8 Alterations instead, which is kind of expensive. This is why generally I prefer to have WoE Essences, because it's way easier to get 2 Alchemy Orbs than it is to get 4 Chaos Orbs. But if I'm in a race, I'm going to do this, and boom, there's an amazing wand that is way better than the Wandcraft, as I said before.
When doing this, do you often grab item level 2 or item level 3 Driftwood wands instead to try to force +1 level?
You can if you're forcing +1 level. However, later on, I tend to just kind of like use it on whatever. I prefer to use it on items with good sockets, just because, like, let's say that I'm using this Wandcraft right here. This is what I'm using from level 20 onwards. I need a 3 blue. Obviously, you're going to want to go from a tier 6 craft and some fire resist to a tier 4 craft and a bunch of spell damage. If you benefit more from plus levels of gems, which typically you don't benefit from +1 levels of gems as much as you do flat damage early on, then yeah, you can go ahead and grab a level 2 version as well. In a speed run, however, you know, going back there and remembering everything and then kind of like hoping that I get +1 fire, it's kind of unlikely. So I tend to not do it. If you're on a League Start, perfectly okay. If you're looking for +1 fire, yes, of course, go ahead and do it. I'm going to show an example of what I would do for a belt. So a belt, you're going to use like anger, hatred, or wrath to get you some guaranteed resistance. And this right here is a pretty decent item. I would use this early on. You can see that it's got some life. A leather belt is a good base, so pretty decent there. And it's got the fire resist craft, or the fire resist roll from the essence. So it's pretty good. You can go ahead and try again. Now this is pretty good. I like that it's on a good base. Again, it's a leather belt. It's got the fire resist roll. We can craft on either life or resistance here. If I was in a speedrun, yeah, I'd use this. I'd craft on resist. So let's see if we can find an amazing item. A little bit better. It's got 5 life on it. Basically, all I'm looking for, like I said, is life and resist. Now, this is an example of a bad item, because the only thing we can really do with this is craft on life, and it's okay. But I really want like a lot of resistance items, because you always want to make sure that you're ahead in resistances. So if I'm in Act 1, I don't want to cap my resistances because that's unrealistic. I just want a bit more than 0. Particularly cold resist is going to be the most important thing. Not many else. You don't encounter many other elemental types, so I'll try to get a little bit of cold res. In Act 2, lightning res is more important by far, so I'll get a little bit of lightning res. By Act 3, fire res goes in there, and it's like kind of all 3. So I'll try to like cap my res around Act 3, Act 4, and in Act 5, I want to make sure that I have 105% resistances, because after you kill Act 5 Katava, you will lose 30% resistances across the board. So this is why I stress having resist so much, is you'll go into Act 6, and if you have 105% fire resist, 105% cold, 105% lightning, you'll be perfectly refined. You'll be resist capped for Act 6 through Act 10. And again, the same thing happens. I'll farm Blood Aqueducts and try to get good items there as well. Going back to the slide now. Ooh. There we go. A little bit of transition over. Next, so Contempt Essences will give you a flat amount of physical damage. These are kind of less interesting. Use a Contempt on a weapon if you're playing like a melee build or some sort of physical build, and you just craft % physical damage. That's basically all you can do. That's the only interesting thing here. Important notes to make is that anger, hatred, and wrath essences do not go on jewelry. They will give you fire, cold, and lightning damage. May seem really cool, but it's not, because you'd rather have resistances. Anger, hatred, and wrath will give you elemental damage to attacks. So if you get an anger essence and you're like, wow, that's going to be really cool on my wand, it's not, because it's only going to give you fire damage to wands. The only other really important essence here is going to be the essence of Zeal. Zeal gives you guaranteed movement speed on boots, so if you don't have movement speed, just chuck them on some boots, maybe a 3-link, maybe a 4-link, I don't know. But Essence of Zeal is also something very important to look out for. Do we have any questions before the exam? I hope you all were paying attention and that you were all taking notes, because we have an exam coming up.
Hope you guys prepared. This is
Yo,
70% of your final grade.
It is 70%. In fact, it's 90% of your final grade. I don't even know why you guys did homework, but Hey, it's your now. Isn't a belt a piece of jewelry? I consider belt to be in a class of its own because it's not a ring or an amulet. Can I elaborate on the life resistances? Have I not talked about it enough? How to not get item locked? So item locking and socket pressure is in regards to, like, let's say you have a 4-link chest piece. It's the most garbage chest piece you've ever seen in your life, but you have to use it because you have a 4-link. The only other way you can prevent item locking is to find an item that is normal. So this is why my filters will show like normal items that are 4-linked. Try and chromatic around some sockets if possible. Like I said, keep it in regards to the stat weights. And then essencing or alchemying the item, preferably essencing. That'll solve your issues. Like, let's say that you find like some normal gloves you can that are 4-linked, you can chrome them a couple times because it's not going to be that unlikely to get your colors. Then you essence them, and you've got a nice pair of gloves. You can now replace the chest piece with something with good stats. There we go. What I use really bad essences for the ring for flat damage recipe. If I find like, if I have like only an anger and a hatred, which is fire and cold resist, remember, I will use those on the wandcraft, or so I will use those both on resist rings to sell for the wandcraft, which I went over in the last class. I will always prioritize the wandcraft over pretty much everything else if I'm playing a caster run because they're so impactful.
Mm-hmm.
When do I use a chess piece? This is completely dependent on how good the chess piece is. Let's say that I'm in Act 1, I find a chess piece with 17 life, it's got 7 cold res and like 12% fire res or something like that. Maybe I would equip that for Merveil and then sell it afterwards. If I'm in Act 2 and I find a chess piece that's got 40 life and it's got like 20% fire and 17% cold off, like, I don't know, Vol Oversoul or one of the bosses, like maybe Weber, sure, I'll equip that. If I'm really scared of dying and I'm playing hardcore for the first time, or if you're playing hardcore for the first time, don't feel bad about wearing a chest piece. The reason why I don't wear chest pieces in run is because it slows down your movement speed by 3%. Generally speaking, I will equip a chest piece in late Act 3, and if for whatever reason I find a 4-link before then, I will equip a 4-link as well. When do you corrupt essence monsters? So if you get a essence of corruption or whatever it's called, the little red thing, you will save that for maps. I believe it's essence of, I can't remember the names of them.
Dread, Scorn, Mystery, and Envy. All the purple ones.
Thank you. Yes, correct. Oh, I didn't know they were all purple. Remnant of Corruption, that's the one. Thank you. All right, we're going to go on to the exam. Seems like that's enough questions. So here, I'm going to give you 2 options, chat. I'm going to give you 2 options. We have a leather belt. This is item level 13. We have 2 different currencies we can use on this. We can use either a Whispering Essence of Hatred. This is the lowest tier of Hatred. You can give us 6 to 11% cold resistance. Or we can use an Orb and Alchemy. Which one are we going to use? A or B? Seen a lot of A's, a few B's, a few Vols. A lot of A's. That's good. A's are good here. A's are good because this is a really low item level. So because it's a really low item level, it's not likely to roll good stats anyways. And so it's going to be better for us to use a Hatred. So we ended up getting pretty lucky. It's got 20 life on it. It's got 7% cold res. It's got an open suffix. This is an amazing belt. Like, this is incredible because we can craft out the resist, as I've said before. This is something I'd use pretty much all the way up through Blood Aqueducts, most likely. I would even use an Alchemy to probably craft on this, just because it's even, like, it's just that nice. But, you know, maybe you find something better. Next, we're going to go over a similar case. This is leather belt. This is item level 50. Do we still use the Whispering Essence of Hatred, or do we use an Orb of Alchemy? So obviously this is a bit dumbed down. But it looks like, yep, we got a lot more Bs. We got a lot more Alchemies. The reason why we're going to use the Alchemy here instead is because a Whispering Essence of Hatred is the lowest tier of Essence. It is going to give us very low rolls because it has a specific tagline on it that I'll go over in a second. But an Alchemy on a higher level base is generally going to be better than a really, really bad Essence on a higher level base.
And low level essences also limit the item level rolls on the item.
Yep, that's what I'm going to cover right here. So the reason why I talk about it is because this is a line at the very top. I went over it, I kind of glossed over it. It's actually pretty important. So this is on the hatred. It says upgrades a normal item to rare item with one guaranteed property. That guaranteed property is the cold resist on it, and it says properties restricted to level 35 and below. So this means that no matter what, it can never roll like really high life on the item. It can never roll like really high fire res, even though it's a hatred, because it's restricted to level 35 and below. So, like, even if this essence didn't have this line that said properties restricted to the level 35 and below, 6 to 11% cold resist is kind of just it's not that great when you're in Act 9 Blood Aqueducts. I want to tell you guys that I actually break the rule that I set for you guys. All right. The thing with speedrunning is there's a lot of rule breakers. So I went over how hatred, anger, hatred, anger, and wrath give you resistances. Use them on gears. You don't use them on jewelry. However, you finish your run. All right. You've got the worst rings you've ever seen in your life, and you've got the worst rolls. You got some like meh essences, some like really, really bad rolls of essences. You can just use those on 2-stone rings that you buy at the Act 10 Epilogue Town or the Act 10 vendor, whichever one. You won't get anything amazing, but if you've got the worst rings in your life, those are basically a really, really bad alchemy orb at that point. So I would go ahead and use them there. All right, that's the end of the exam. There's no curve in this class. If you got a 0, you failed, and if you got a 50%, you failed for life. So, yeah.
Can we retake this exam?
Nope, no retakes.
Oh, that's
Got to take the whole semester over again. That would be all 64 slides.
Damn.
American education system, by the way.
That was beautiful.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think that's all I've got for this presentation.